Hey everyone, I'm Jamie O'Brien. I think I know most everybody in here, but I teach psychology. I'm teaching lower level courses and upper level courses, and most of my classes have about 30 students in them, and I'm teaching fully online this semester and next semester. And I also am teaching fully asynchronously. So I was just going to share a few things that I included in my courses this semester to try to focus on three areas. So we got some feedback a while ago about a survey that went out. I don't know where this data came from or whatever, but it was on the tips for how to get things moved online. And Spring Hill College students, we kind of grouped into three categories what they felt was key to their success in online courses. And those three areas were consistency, community, and consideration for differences in circumstances. And so I kind of took those three areas and tried to make sure that the way that I was rethinking and restructuring my courses and presenting them addressed each of those three areas as best as I could in an online environment. So I was going to share with you guys just a couple of things that I did this semester that I think are working really well. And then, of course, if you have questions or you want to follow up or ask me, stuff outside of this or in the breakout sessions, that's fine too. Before I start in those areas, I wanted to really quickly just share two tools with you that I use that I found really helpful. One is Text Now. You're probably aware that there's apps that you can download where it's not giving out your actual real number, but it can allow students to call and text you. So I put a Text Now app. It has a local number and I can change it after a semester if I have an issue with a particular student or whatever. So I like the fact that I don't have to give out my real phone number. And I will tell you, students don't overuse that or abuse it or anything, but it's great when you have online tests for them to just text you really quick if something's going on. So that's a tool I found really useful. I also use a scheduling app for my booking online appointments for all of my office hours, and many of you are probably doing this too, but the one that I wanted to share with you is free. It's called 10 to 8, so 10 and then TO and then the number 8. And the reason that I really like it is it integrates with Zoom. And so when your students schedule appointments, they can get a direct Zoom link that goes into your calendar and theirs. It sends them email reminders, text reminders, and it allows them to reschedule through the app. So I've been using this for about 2 years now and I absolutely love it. So I just wanted to share those two with you because they just added the Zoom thing. So I don't have to set up any appointments through Zoom with my students, which I really like a lot. So the three areas, consistency, community, and consideration for differences. As far as consistency, like most of you guys would probably do, I have a very structured course outline. I also set up a weekly checklist. So every Monday morning, all materials are up by 8 o'clock. I have a 1-week checklist. The course is asynchronous. They can go through the checklist and see everything. So in that weekly checklist is a link to my lectures, so everything's right there. So I've had a lot of positive feedback about that so far. I incorporated a new assignment this semester that I do 4 times in the semester, and it's a worksheet, and I call this a workflow plan. And this allows students, it asks them a couple of questions like, what are the tasks that you worked on this past week? How long did those tasks take you? What were your challenges that you had? And then what's your workflow plan for the work that's coming up for next week or the next 2 weeks? And then at the bottom of that, it also asks them, were there any challenges that you faced, accessing the material, understanding things? And at the very last question, they are required to come up with 2 questions about the course of the material. So the form is the same every time, but the responses as we go are different. And I have learned a lot about what students are struggling with through this. I've been able to, every time I go through those, I answer those questions individually, which is really time consuming, but it allows me to make sure that they're engaging in the material and see where they're having problems. So it kind of forces them. And that's worth about 20% of their grade overall to do all 4 of those workflow plans in most of the classes, about 20%. All communication is through Schoology because in that survey, students were commenting that emailing them, I used to always just use email, and I switched to communicating only through Schoology because students said that was really beneficial to them. By the way, I outline all 3 of these areas in my syllabus and tell my students what my goals are regarding these 3 areas and why these things are working together and why I came up with them. The second area, community, I created a discussion board section in all my classes that I call a virtual student lounge. And there's boxes broken down for them to come and hang out with each other, ask questions. Yes, I can share that. Ask questions to each other, share things that just apply to daily life. And I've been doing this for about 2 years now. I just never called it a student lounge. And what I used to use it for was in class when students had questions, I would post the answers there with research and support and articles and stuff for people who wanted to read them. So that's been really, I think students have used, you know, not everybody uses it, but there's been a lot of people will share, you know, how they found their textbooks cheaper or whatever. So there's been a lot of resource sharing there, which I think is good. The other thing to build community is I did away with papers in my reflection papers in my lower level classes, and in my upper level classes also, they do something called reflection chats. So all of their assignments now, worth about 40 to 50% of their grade in each class is a, it's supposed to be a 1 to 2 minute video, but realistically they're about 2 to 3 minutes. They can do video or audio of themselves, but they are answering prompts related to the questions in the course. And so the keys to this is I post a video of myself asking them a question, and I give them a ton of options to choose from. And the key is that they can't answer a question in the same way that somebody else did. So I take a 30-person class, I break them into reflection chat teams of 8 to 10 people apiece, and they work in those small groups so they can only see what those people are posting throughout the whole semester. So that's another way, like some people are shy. It's only 8 people seeing their responses, not the whole class. And so they're kind of working in a small group with each other throughout the semester. And some of those prompts are like application to your own life. I'll have them read 3 myths, and they'll, like for one of the myths, they will tell the group what their most compelling research was, tell the group from another myth what applied to them, and then they always have to ask a question or provide a resource to the group. And then in the next video, somebody can answer a question that anybody else proposed. So some of the questions that they come up with are, you know, how does this apply to your life? They can be points of confusion, like, hey, I didn't understand this, can somebody explain it? They might be, I might direct them to come up with quiz style questions, and then somebody else has to answer the quiz style question. So each person, I think a challenge with discussion posts is that people are posting them at all different times. The very first person, this can be done totally asynchronously, because the very first person, they don't have to answer any questions. So that's the benefit about posting first. Everybody who comes after has to ensure that they've looked at all of the videos before them. So this would take them about 20 to 30 minutes max to look at the videos before them. And so they answer questions that other people have posted, they share their own responses, and then they pose a question for whoever comes after them. And they don't have to necessarily answer the question of just the person right before them. It can be any question that hasn't been answered, could be answered in a new or insightful way. So I can talk more if anybody's interested in that assignment, but I think it's been really, really well received. And it's a lot more interesting for me to grade those than a bunch of papers on, and it reduces issues regarding plagiarism like significantly, which I've really enjoyed too. So I really like that a lot. The key is to give them a lot of options of what they can talk about so that in their groups, they don't have to worry about being redundant, but then be kind of strategic in the options that you give them to make sure that they're actually covering a broad span of, they can't just go to page 4 and answer one question without actually watching the lecture or whatever. So I can talk more about those if anybody's interested. In terms of consideration for differences, I just noted that I added flexibility in my policies for late assignments and drop. I have a certain number of drops and skips that they can use for any reason without explanation. I do provide some extra credit options, and students can use the audio only, because I know there's some concerns like with the reflection chat. I know there's concerns about like what's in people's backgrounds and privacy and access to technology and stuff, so they can do audio only, and that's fine. But I have found that most students do the video one, and I give them a little tutorial on how to do that. So I think that's pretty much the major things that I'm doing this semester. I also wanted to let you guys know that in the past, I have always provided a full PowerPoint lecture of the chapter with my voice behind it and not my face. And just in talking to colleagues, you know, people have always said, oh, students don't want to sit there for 45, 50 minutes and watch a full lecture of a PowerPoint. They just want like a brief overview and then like the PowerPoint slides. So this semester I did my health psych class started at the end of last semester when COVID started. So I had all of those done. The second half of the semester were done in full PowerPoints with me narrating the PowerPoints. This semester I tried the other option of doing an overview. And so my health psych class, they have experienced it both ways. So I'm currently collecting data from them, just asking them the one question: which way did you prefer? Did you prefer the fully narrated PowerPoints, or did you prefer the brief overview with the PowerPoints? And I have 6 people who responded so far, and a majority of them, 4 out of 6, said that they preferred the fully narrated full lecture PowerPoints versus the overview. So I have about 30 students in that class, so I can update you guys if you're interested. And that's just one class, but I was just really curious of what they thought about it versus what we think they think about it. So that's all I have to share. If anybody has any questions, or we're going to move forward and do breakout rooms after or whatever.
Thank you, Jamie. I hope you publish that too. I know there's some great teaching journals, and having that data would be really helpful. Thanks for all you shared. I'm going to steal some of those ideas already. Lauren is going to share next.
Wow, that's a hard act to follow. So my classes are in person, every single one of them. But there have been a couple of times where, you know, there was a suspected COVID case in my family or something, and for whatever reason we had to go online for, you know, a surprise. Tomorrow's class is online. So what I wanted to talk about, and I made a PowerPoint. I didn't know, so maybe I can share that with the group. Mostly because it has pictures. Here we go. So what I want to talk about is sort of what I do, like on trying to switch things, like sort of on a moment's notice. And so since I'm doing that, I don't want to throw something new at them. I can't do the cool apps. I saw so many cool things that I wanted to try this semester, but you know, because we were in person, we did some of that while we were in class, but when I'm online, I don't want to throw new things at them. So things like capping the end of the session. So like a class is like 50 minutes. I know that I'm kind of messing up their schedule by changing to online. They maybe have a different commute than normal. So I cut those in, 10 minutes delay to the start of the class and 10 minutes cut off at the end, to try to sort of help students adjust to the change. Via Zoom were how the meetings were done. And then also what I'm trying to capture is what we do in class, not only like sort of hopefully not slowing down the speed and those kinds of things, but also keeping the culture. And my classes, no matter what level they are always like student-led, discussion-based, inquiry-oriented. In the like pre-Cali age, here's an example of what I do with the lowers. They're doing like sort of group projects, hands-on things. So here they have these things called wiki sticks. They're like waxy string, and they're practicing doing function transformations on an initial function. And so as a group, they come up with a solution and then present so that it's a little bit lower stakes. And then for the majors, this is more like what my class would look like, where they go home, they read about some mathematical theory, and then solve some problems on it at home, and then we come into class and discuss them and make sure that everyone's on the same page. So there's a lot of like student leading and discussion based that is hard in COVID times with social distancing already, but then to try to do the same kind of interaction online, I also kind of, I don't know, struggled with. So just for the record, the fun thing is that this is actually my 3rd semester in a row that I've had to move a course online, not always on a moment's notice. The first time was because of this fella. I just really wanted to show a picture of him. That's why I did slides, to be quite honest. But anyway, because of that, it was totally asynchronous. I was teaching my Intro to Proofs class, which is what the previous major level course pictures were from. And so what we did there was students regularly would present in class, and now they were just submitting things online. And in class, there were requirements about contributions. It sounded very similar actually to what Jamie said about, you could ask a clarifying question or make a useful comment or have a conjecture or something to move the conversation forward. But what I found was when we were online, the students would kind of just like check the box. In part, it was before we're online for everything, so I think it was weird for them to try to keep up with the discussions. But I felt like they were really disconnected and I was really disconnected. So when I'm thinking about courses this semester, that's like always in my head of how to fix those kinds of things. So in spring, we all know what happened. So in that case, with most of my upper divisions, even though we weren't supposed to, my classes I kept synchronous for the most part. One of them, they were a little bit more independent, so I let that be sort of video lectures that they watched. But the other ones I kept as like a Zoom meeting, which was nice because we got to do like personal, I felt like that was like a good time for human. So we always like started with some like, how are we doing kind of thing. I think it was helpful for them to kind of feel like the normal classroom. But what I found was that, well, first of all, I had students who were now working, which is why we weren't supposed to do synchronous. And so there were people like calling in from parking lots, and there was sort of the awkwardness with like what your backdrop is that I hadn't thought of until like we were in it. So there was obviously some negatives there. And also I noticed that in class, I can kind of manage who speaks, but when I had the whole group there, it tended to be just like sort of the first person that spoke for the room. And there was a little less, at least in the class that I have in mind, there was a little less back and forth. So what I'm doing now, which thankfully Stephanie is not here because I feel like maybe I'd get in trouble for calling it hybrid synchronous. I think it is in the hybrid spirit, though. What I do, well, and maybe we'll in the lower division, I don't do this. In those, I am doing, like I said before, sort of capping the class to make it slightly shorter. And then fortunately using breakout rooms, so actually getting some group work in, it seems to be easier on the online version than in person. Some of the sort of synchronous things that I've tried to do in person haven't been quite as successful, but I'm really interested in hearing about like discussion boards and things and how those have been used. But anyway, what I do for the upper division, this hybrid synchronous, is I split this class works well to split in half. It's regularly an hour and 15-minute class, but I've changed it into a very small version of that. So they just meet for 30 minutes. In part, that's to help with some of the issues with synchronous meetings, especially when we're like at home, now that we're all at home online. So shorter meeting times, but with just half of the students, or if it was a bigger class, I would do just smaller group sizes. The students still present as they would normally in class. We discuss as we would normally in class, including those that were the other half's presentations, that they post them separately, like I did when I was gone with my son. And then we record the meeting so that the other half can still see it. The half that's not meeting in person via Zoom will post a presentation. The first time I did it, I required that they were videos. It's a writing class, so I think sort of communicating orally tends to be easier. So we in class sort of present in, orally, obviously, and there's less focus on writing. And so I had sort of forced that in the first implementation, but I've kind of gotten a little open-minded now. To now they can also submit like a written proof. That way we can also read through their discussions. And in part, I think because I placed it better, they're still sort of commenting on the others' presentations like I did in the original fall implementation. So then next time we meet, we flip and meet again. And I think that this is a nice compromise between the sort of one extreme or the other. I still get really nice discussions and a little bit less like sort of leaning towards the big voices. So I was pretty happy with how things are going. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I was thinking maybe, do we want to ask any questions? I know we didn't give Jamie time, but if anyone had any questions for Jamie or Lauren before we go on to Daniel about anything in terms of logistics or elaborating on anything? Okay, well, at least I wanted to open that up just in case, because I had a bunch of questions, but of course they can wait till our breakout rooms. So Daniel, it's your turn.
Hello.
Here.
Let me, I'm going to share my screen. And can we see that? Hello, can you guys see that? Oh, good. Okay. So what I wanted to do is talk about asynchronous teaching, and Jamie, of course, was talking about that and is very helpful. And so I was going to talk about some of the things that have worked pretty well for me. I think whether they apply to your class and the way you're approaching your class is, you know, a different question. First thing I would do is wait for this to load. That's odd. Okay, well, that's not, that slide doesn't want to work with this for some reason. It's just a book. It's called Effective Teaching Online by Tina Stavridis, which I think is a very excellent book. So, okay. Nothing is showing up. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. This is the issue. I have animations on. So what I want to talk about was what really works for me and kind of a big picture to get an asynchronous course going, because I don't think we mostly know how to do that. We're not used to doing that. And importantly, I don't think your students are used to doing that. They're used to being in a classroom. They know how to work with that kind of environment. So a few things that work for me. One really simple thing is have very clear outcomes or very clear learning objectives and really stick to them religiously. Everything you do, every assignment, every question sort of keys to one or more of those, and that will give your course a lot of focus. For when you're designing it, you won't waste a lot of energy on things that are superfluous. I also try to think about, you know, how is my course design itself functioning? How is it helping my students get to where I want them to get? And so I have these kinds of goals for myself. You can see my goals right there. I'm so sorry, I forgot about the animations. Here we go. This is going terrible. Here we go. One really important thing that works for me is that I like to keep my courses very simple and very repetitive. This is easier for me. It takes less time for me, but more importantly, I think it's easier for students, and I think it helps them learn. It gives me a lot of free time to work with students in a kind of one-on-one way. Like I said, simple, I mean, make a clear design with very few features. Don't use external software if you can help it. Rely on the LMS. When you're designing exams, make them take-home exams the best you can. I like the student completion feature in Schoology, which is to say when they do one thing, it opens up the next thing. That way they always know what to do next. Make your courses repetitive. This has worked really well for me, which is just to say that my course has, say, 8 sections in it. Well, every section is laid out the same way with the same kinds of assignments due at the same time in that section. And that really helps a lot in making students know what to do and feeling comfortable so they can focus on getting the work done rather than figuring out what's in the LMS, what's due when, and so on. Again, they're used to a classroom. They're not as used to working online. See if this works better. No. I use videos a lot. I might disagree with Jamie a little bit on the length issue. I do think 5 to 10 minutes is a really good place to be. I feel like I get more student engagement with the videos. All my videos are sort of focused in, again, on learning objectives, nothing extraneous. Another thing is important is you have a video, immediately after the video, they should move on to some kind of activity. Maybe it's just a simple quiz, maybe it's a discussion, but something that goes with the video. My suggestion, maybe this is a third option rather than short video, long video, is you have many videos that are short and then are paired with activities, right? Think about a classroom. In a classroom, you wouldn't want to have a 45-minute lecture with no breaks in it. You would want to stop and ask questions. You would want to stop and have students do things. So you might think of it that way, and that's the way I try to approach it. Sometimes I have fewer, but I like to have more if I can. When you're making videos, if you want to use a lot of videos, you need to find a way to do it efficiently. And the number one thing you can do to make your videos efficient is like I'm doing now. You go out there and you record and you do what you're doing and you mess up, that's fine. In a class, you talk, you mess up, that's fine too. People understand and you get used to that idea. You get used to not being so nervous about it. And here's a number of other things you might look at. Pay attention to what's on your screen. Look at the camera when you're talking. Look at it or slightly above it. It's helpful. Of course, you're going to look around sometimes. And if you're showing yourself and your world, make sure you know what's behind you and you've taken some time to think about that before you show your students. Here's one really important bit of advice, I think, is get a good microphone. A good microphone increases the quality of your videos immensely. And it's a simple thing you can do. You can see here, I have a very fancy microphone in front of me. They're not that expensive, maybe $100 for a really good microphone. Grading is an important part of making this go well. And what I would say, and I think this is a fairly standard thing to say, is grade early and grade often. I like to use really well-designed multiple choice questions and quizzes. And you can see a lot of the stuff I do there, but the idea is that the students should be able to engage this stuff and learn from the experience. I like to try to give them unlimited attempts and feedback in the questions, but additionally, it's small stakes. It doesn't count for a lot of their grade. They don't feel a lot of pressure. They're not going to go out and cheat on something simple if they can just try it 3 or 4 times, and every time they get it wrong, they get an explanation why. That's a learning experience for them, and it helps them, stay engaged with the material. For grading, one thing that's really helpful for you, and maybe you do this already, is use rubrics. They save you time. They help you grade more consistently. And Schoology has them built in. When I grade, it's simple as, good, not good, terrible. I put those in, then maybe I put 1 or 2 comments related to that in addition to my inline comments. And they get a lot of different kinds of feedback, and they can understand better how their grade was determined. Last thing, this is actually kind of the most important thing for me, is when I set up an asynchronous course, what I want to do is I want them to be working and me not to be working in a way. But really what I mean is that frees me up. I'm not sitting there giving lectures and grading stuff constantly. I mean, a lot of this is auto grading if they're doing multiple choice. But maybe I'm making course updates. Maybe I'm jumping into the discussion boards. One thing I really like to do is have one-on-one meetings with my students. In most of my classes, that's actually a mandatory component for each section. Let's talk for 10 minutes about how you did. And since I've already got the course out there in front of them, that gives me time to do that. And I think that's very helpful. Like Jamie, I like to use some kind of service to manage the booking part, because that would be time consuming. You Can Book Me has worked really well for me. I'm gonna check out the one Jamie mentioned too. And of course, with all that free time, I can grade the essays and grade the discussions and those other things that are a little more labor intensive for grading. And again, they're getting feedback. And so what I think is, when I'm teaching an asynchronous course, teaching isn't standing in front of a classroom. Teaching is every day I go to my office and I survey my courses. How are they doing? Here's some feedback. Here's some guidance. Better reach out to this student. They're not getting done. Meet with this student. Generally trying to engage the student and really be a presence. And asynchronous courses are surprisingly helpful in doing that. You would think it's the opposite. They're just doing their own thing. But while they're doing their own thing, you're there to guide them. And that's what you should be doing. So there you go.
Thank you, Daniel. These were all really helpful. I appreciate it. Any questions for Daniel before we break into breakout rooms? Okay, since there's so few of us.
I have a question. So Daniel, it sounds like you make use of a lot of the features on Schoology. Have you used, I mean, I know we're probably switching to Canvas, but have you used the learning outcomes?
On
there?
Schoology?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't yet. I was going to. It's pretty labor intensive to get the mastery outcomes built in on a question per question basis.
Right.
At one point I was exploring getting the philosophy student workers to do it for me. But then I just decided to wait since we're switching to Canvas, and Canvas has a version of that, and I'm hoping it's a lot easier on Canvas.
Okay.
Because I think the Schoology version's kind of clunky because you have to enter it in one
Right.
question at a time, which is
unless you're a K through 12 teacher, and then you can use the core learning outcomes.
Yeah,
Of course, not. So.
well, even that, because I mean, I have like built-in outcomes I defined in Schoology, but you know, if I have 100 questions, all of which test this one outcome, I have to enter that in 100 times rather than once for the set. And so I didn't think it worth it yet.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other strategies that they use that they want to share with the larger group while we're recording that can be passed on to others?
Well, I know that one thing that Tom does that I want to try with my fully asynchronous online courses that makes it more like interactive is just having kind of open sessions once a week or something where anyone can just show up and chat with each other and chat with the instructor. And I didn't see that mentioned, and it just seems like a useful tool for certain disciplines.
Did you get a lot of, or did Tom, I guess, get a lot of people showing up? Because I tried that for a couple weeks and I got 0 show up. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, from my understanding, he would get people showing up every time, but it was often the same people, you know?
I just wanted to mention something I accidentally discovered the week before Thanksgiving is, and maybe everybody else already knew this, but when you're in PowerPoint slideshow, you can do subtitles, which is really nice whether you're doing a Zoom lecture or face-to-face with a mask on. And if you record your Zoom lecture with the subtitles, then you don't have to convert your PowerPoint to video, and it's a lot faster sharing the video from Zoom recording. And you have subtitles because you put the subtitles on in PowerPoint. So you just right-click when you're on slideshow in PowerPoint, where you had choices previous slide or end show. There's now a choice that says subtitles, and they're fairly accurate. I mean, even with scientific terms and everything, they're pretty good. And it's a lot faster then to share the video than converting a PowerPoint to a video.
And I've been doing activities with Google Forms, which I'd never really used before. But some of them will just be like kind of asking about their background information, but then I started making kind of more advanced ones where we'll look at like primary sources, activities we used to do in class where they read something and then they write their explanation of what they think it means. And then they get to see kind of my explanation and see if it's different, and kind of doing things like that as a way to kind of recreate what we used to do in person.
Okay, well, I will split us up into 2 breakout rooms to maybe share some more ideas, ask questions, and I'll just make it random. And then when we're done, we can just log off. It's already 12:50. So thank you all for attending. Oh, let me go ahead and stop recording first.